Many of you guys seem to be avid Counter-Strike players, as evidenced by my inbox, which has been flooded with at least 3 to 4 emails a week asking me what kind of rig I'll build to play CSGO, with a budget of around $500 for the core hardware. Since I don't play Counter-Strike all that much, answering this question accurately was difficult, so I've decided to change that. Based on what I've found so far, it seems like $500 might be overkill for a 1080p gaming rig that focuses solely on CSGO performance. Therefore, I recommend this build to any die-hard Counter-Strike players that also plan on giving some of the more modern AAA titles a shot, such as Tom Clancy's The Division. Before we continue, here's the full disclaimer guys. This build guide has been created with a focus on Australian and US pricing, so if you live in a different region that has different price ratios, then you probably might not find this build guide particularly useful. Also, things I throw under the optional banner include an optical drive, Wi-Fi adapter, and aftermarket cooling. Additionally, this build focuses exclusively on the core components or the box and all the bits inside, if you will. This means stuff like the keyboard, mouse, headset and software are all extras. This stuff is all a little more personal and you might even already have it from a previous build. Having said that, let's dive into the build, starting with the CPU. For this price range, I feel the Core i3-6100 is by far the best option. Although this is only a dual-core processor, it does support hyper-threading for 4 threads. Combine that with the excellent efficiency of Skylake and the relatively high 3.7 GHz operating frequency, and you have a processor that's capable of taking on the latest games using a powerful GPU. The LGA 1151 processor and its supporting platform also provide a nice upgrade path to a more powerful Core i5 or even Core i7 processor down the track. There's a huge amount of variety available when it comes to the motherboard. With a reasonably tight budget, we went with an Intel H110 motherboard as they tend to start at around 55 US or 85 Aussie. There are some other decent options around the $55 mark with some of the better examples including the Gigabyte H110MA, ASRock H110M HDV, or MSI H110M Pro D. In terms of features and design, all three boards are very similar, so it really comes down to which offers the best price at the time. If you do plan to upgrade to a Core i5 or better down the track, then we suggest considering spending almost twice as much on a Z170 motherboard, such as the MSI Z170A Pro or ASRock Z170A X1. Both cost around $90. This will be a worthwhile upgrade if you're going to purchase an unlocked K processor. If you do go with a cheaper H110 motherboard, keep in mind the memory will likely be limited to 2133 MHz, so there isn't much sense in buying higher clocked memory if it comes at a premium. All three H110 motherboards that we suggested support DDR4 memory, and we recommend an 8GB dual channel kit. Pricing starts at around $30 and we really like the GIL Evo Potenza DDR4 2400 8GB kit for just $29. Pricing will no doubt vary, but expect to pay $30 to $35 US or $45 to $55 Australian dollars. Now for the all-important graphics card. $500 seems like a decent chunk of change to play around with at first. That is until you get to the graphics card. At $200, the Radeon R9 380 and GeForce GTX 960 are quickly going from mid-range to low-end products. Nevertheless, they're both very capable. Picking between them is no easy task, and frankly you could happily go either way. As I see it, there's no wrong choice here. Ultimately, you have to pick one, so if you have a preference, that makes life easier. The 4GB models now cost pretty much the same as the 2GB models, so that's a no-brainer. The 4GB 960 and 380 start at $190, and for this build, we're going with the Radeon R9 380. However, before all of you waving a green flag dive for the dislike button, I'll also include the GTX 960 results as well. Storage is where things get a little complicated, mostly because it pains me to build any system without an SSD. In order to meet the budget, we've set aside $50 for storage, which buys you a decent 1TB 7200 RPM hard drive or a small 120GB SSD. Obviously you can get both, but this will inflate the overall build cost by up to $50 depending on which way you go. For the hard drive, we recommend the Western Digital Blue 1TB 7200 RPM model, which can be had for $54 US or 70 Australian. For the SSD, the ADATA SP550 120GB is really hard to beat at just $35, while the 240GB model offers an even better cost per gigabyte ratio at $58, so choose wisely. Now for the case and power supply. There's a few options here, the most cost effective of which is the RaidMax EXO, which includes a 450W PSU for just $45 US or 60 Australian. Granted, this case includes a cheap power supply, but it'll get the job done, and 450 watts is plenty for this build, as you can expect the draw from the wall to be well under 300 watts when gaming. If you aren't a fan of this budget combo, then the deep cool Tesseract SW for $40 plus the Raid Max Hybrid 2 RX 530 SS 530 watt power supply for another $40 is another excellent, wallet friendly combo. Now that we have all that mostly worked out, let's consult the benchmarks. For benchmarking Counter-Strike Global Offensive, we used the offline bot mode on the cruise map. The benchmark run lasted 60 seconds and the average of 3 separate runs was reported. There is a user-made benchmark for CSGO called FPS Benchmark, but I found the results weren't all that consistent with what I was finding from single and multiplayer portions of the game. Anyway, as you can see, the $500 rig has no trouble keeping the frame rate above 100 FPS at 1080p with all the in-game settings cranked up. It is possible to increase the MSAA level, but every other setting was maxed out. It was interesting to find the lowly R7 370 beating out the GTX 960 in this title. What's more, with an average of 151 FPS, the 370 plays just as well as the 380 for this purpose, gaming at 1080p. It certainly seems like you could save quite a bit more money on a rig designed exclusively for CSGO. So what if you want to play other games like say Tom Clancy's The Division? Well, providing you're happy to use mid-range quality settings, this gaming system is very capable at 1080p. Here we see an average of 65 FPS with a minimum of 51 FPS. This time, the R7 370 is a good bit slower than both the R9 380 and GTX 960. Upgrading to the Core i5 6600K offers little extra performance with the 380, while the upgrade to the 380X will net you a little extra performance. If you aren't too picky about frame rates, the Division can actually be enjoyed using high quality visual settings. Here our $500 rig was good for an average of 49 FPS, while frame rates never dip below 38 FPS. The R9 380 was again faster than the GTX 960 and a good bit faster than the R7 370. Meanwhile, the 380X offers a mild performance bump, as does the Core i5 6600K. As I suspected going into this, a $500 budget for a CSGO gaming machine is a bit overkill if you plan to game at 1080p and don't require over 100 frames per second. Still, if it's a well-balanced and reasonably affordable gaming PC that you seek, then we feel that today there's no better option. The base version of our build came in at $510 or 800 Australian dollars, which is very good given the performance you can expect in the latest AAA titles. Adding a 120GB boot SSD to the mix along with a separate case and power supply increases the total cost to around $585 US or 900 Australian dollars. Again, this is an excellent buy, particularly given it leaves the door wide open for some very worthwhile upgrades down the track. Upgrades such as the Radeon R9 380X, which you can expect to pay an additional $30 US for, though there are some bargains to be had, so keep an eye out for those. At the time of putting this guide together, the PowerColor PCS Plus 380X could be had for just $205 on Newegg.com. If you do plan on upgrading the CPU in the future, then perhaps consider spending a bit more on the motherboard. With Z170 boards costing as little as $90, they offer much better storage options, multi-GPU support, and considerably better features for tuning the memory and CPU. Also, if you're worried about memory, consider getting a single 8GB stick, as this leaves the option available to add a second stick down the track for a 16GB capacity. This will limit you to single channel memory performance in the meantime, although thankfully that has almost no impact on gaming performance. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this build, and if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. I'm your host Matt as always, and I'll see you guys next time.